You were trained into usefulness before you were trained into truth. Long before you learned to speak with confidence, you learned to read the room. Long before you learned what you wanted, you learned what would keep you included. This was not a moral choice. It was a bodily one. A tightening in the chest when voices rose. A small freeze when displeasure crossed the face you depended on. A quick calculation in the gut. Soften, explain, adjust, stay agreeable. You learned that love arrived conditionally, carried on your usefulness, delivered when you were easy, responsive, helpful, understandable. So you became understandable before you became real. You explained before anyone asked. You apologized before anyone accused. You offered solutions before anyone admitted a problem. This is not generosity. This is an old survival structure that never learned it could stop. Picture a kitchen late in the evening. The light above the sink hums. A plate cools on the table untouched. Your phone lies face down beside it. You have already rehearsed the message you might send. Not to state what you want, but to smooth what you feel. You can feel the familiar pressure just below the sternum. A quiet insistence that says clarify, soften, make sure they don't misunderstand you. You type a sentence, you delete it. You type another longer this time. Adding context, adding reassurance. Your shoulders lean forward. Even though you are alone, your body is already negotiating. This pattern did not form because you are kind. It formed because you were useful. Somewhere early, usefulness became the price of belonging. You were praised for being mature, understanding, helpful, reasonable. You were not praised for having limits. You were not met with curiosity when you withdrew. You were met with confusion, disappointment, sometimes withdrawal of warmth. So your nervous system learned a simple equation. Closeness equals accommodation. Distance equals danger. Over time, this equation hardened into an unconscious contract. I will remain legible. I will remain available. I will remain useful in return. I am allowed to stay. The tragedy is not that you give. The tragedy is that you give before you choose. You give before you are asked. You give before you are seen. And slowly, without drama, your presence becomes a function. People learn what you do, not who you are. They come to you with their weight, their confusion, their demands because you have trained them silently that you will carry it. Authority cannot emerge in such a structure. Authority requires opacity. It requires the right not to be immediately known, immediately helpful, immediately responsive. There is a doorway. We've seen. Many of you know it. Someone stands in front of you. Code already on. Hand on the handle. The conversation has turned slightly tense, not explosive, just enough to disturb the air. You feel the familiar urge rise in your throat. A quick explanation just to make sure there's no misunderstanding. You step forward just half a step. Your voice becomes lighter, quicker. What I meant was. The words tumble out before you have decided whether they should exist. Their posture relaxes. The tension dissolves. You have succeeded and something in you goes flat. You believed you were preserving connection, but the psyche was actually preserving the old contract. The behavior is explanation. The body consequence is the hollowing in the chest. The slight collapse of the spine. The relational consequence is subtle but decisive. They remain central. You remain responsive. Authority does not arrive here because nothing has changed in the hierarchy of attention. I stand at Bollingen in the cold air. The lake is still, its surface dark and unreflective. There is the smell of damp stone and iron. The night does not rush to explain itself. It simply is. This is what authority feels like in the psyche. Not force, not dominance, but a density that does not lean forward. Many confuse authority with assertiveness. This is a shallow mistake. Assertiveness still argues. It still seeks recognition. Authority does not announce itself. It alters the field by withdrawing its surplus. When the empath stops being useful, something destabilizing happens in the surrounding system. Not because you have become cruel, but because the invisible economy has lost its most reliable currency. Consider a holiday gathering. The table is crowded. Plates overlap. Someone makes a remark that lands slightly wrong. Not sharp enough to confront. Not gentle enough to ignore. All eyes flicker then settle on you. You feel it instantly. The familiar pull to mediate, to translate, to smooth. Your jaw tightens. Your hand grips the edge of the chair. This time you do nothing. You take a sip of water. The silence stretches 1 second longer than usual. Someone shifts uncomfortably. Another person clears their throat and speaks. The moment passes altered. In that small refusal to function, a new line is drawn. Not spoken, felt. You did not rescue the room and the room survived. This is how authority begins. Not with a declaration but with an absence. The psyche resists this shift violently at first. Guilt rushes in like cold air through an open window. Old phrases surface. You're being selfish. You're making things worse. You're abandoning your role. These are not ethical insights. They are withdrawal symptoms from an unconscious agreement. The body often reacts before the mind understands. A tight throat, a restless stomach, sleep that comes later than usual. These are signs that a structure is losing its grip. I have seen this pattern countless times. The one who has carried the emotional weight of a family, a partnership, a workplace. The one who anticipates, adjusts, absorbs. When this person stops even slightly, others feel exposed. They may accuse you of changing, of becoming cold, of withholding. They are not responding to your behavior. They are responding to the loss of a function they had mistaken for love. There is often a phone call scene here. The phone vibrates. You know who it is. Before you look, you answer. The familiar tone arrives. Complaint, confusion, expectation. You listen. Your body waits for the moment to intervene, to offer clarity. This time you say less. Your voice is slower. You do not rush to fix. There is a pause on the other end. They speak again, louder this time, as if volume could summon your old role. Your chest tightens but you remain where you are. The call ends awkwardly. You believed that being needed made you secure, but the psyche was actually trading your presence for permission to exist. The behavior was constant availability. The body consequence was chronic tension in the shoulders, shallow breathing. The relational consequence was dependency masked as closeness. Authority does not grow in dependency. It grows in differentiation. When you no longer guarantee emotional labor, others must face their own reactions. Some will turn away. Some will escalate. Some will attempt to shame you back into position. This is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that the structure is being revealed. At Bollingen there are tools resting where I last left them. Iron implements cool to the touch. They do not move unless moved. There is no apology in their stillness. The psyche, when it reclaims authority, takes on a similar quality. It does not justify its weight. The term shadow is often misunderstood as something dark or immoral. In truth, it is simply what was excluded in order to belong. In your case, what was excluded was your right to be non-functional, your right to say nothing, your right to let others sit with their discomfort. When you stop being useful, this shadow emerges not as aggression but as restraint. There is a bedroom scene many of you recognize. Late night, the room is dim. You are lying on your side, phone glowing softly. You replay a conversation from earlier. You think of what you could have said to make it smoother. Your fingers hover over the screen. You start typing. You stop. Your heart beats faster. You place the phone face down. The silence is loud. Your body feels exposed as if you have stepped outside without a coat. This is the threshold. Most turn back here. Those who do not begin to feel a different gravity. Authority is not granted by others. It emerges when the psyche no longer organizes itself around being consumed. When you stop offering yourself as a solution, you are no longer managed by reaction. You become less predictable. And in the psyche, unpredictability is power, not because it manipulates, but because it cannot be easily absorbed. I stand still now. Frost forming along the stone. The air tastes metallic. Above, the stars hold their positions without commentary. Nothing here asks to be understood. Nothing here explains itself. When usefulness ends, clarity begins. Not the clarity of answers, but the clarity of position. You are no longer leaning forward. Your spine remembers itself. Your breath deepens, uneven at first, then steadier. Others sense this before they can name it. They may not like it. Authority is rarely liked at first. It disrupts familiar economies, but it is felt. And this feeling, once established, cannot be argued away. The first reaction to the loss of your usefulness is rarely quiet. It often arrives disguised as concern. Someone asks if you are all right. Someone wonders aloud if something is wrong with you. The question carries an undertone you recognize immediately. It is not curiosity about your inner life. It is alarm that the old arrangement may no longer hold. You hear it in the slight tension in their voice, the way their words circle rather than land. Your body responds before your mind forms a thought. The muscles at the back of your neck tighten. Your stomach draws inward. There is an impulse to reassure, to say you are just tired, just busy, just distracted. Anything to keep the ground from shifting. You have said these words before. They have always worked. This time you let the question pass unanswered. Not traumatically, not defiantly. You simply do not rush to fill the space. The silence lingers. It is not hostile. It is unfamiliar. And in that unfamiliarity, something essential is exposed. How much of the relationship depended on your constant self-translation? There is a scene at the table, perhaps in a cafe or a dining room. The conversation turns toward expectations, plans, favors, emotional availability. You notice how quickly eyes turn to you when something needs to be resolved. You notice it because you are no longer already moving. Your hands remain still. Your posture does not incline. The words that once rose automatically now wait behind your teeth. Someone else speaks awkwardly. The rhythm of the group falters. You feel a flicker of guilt, sharp and brief. Then it passes, replaced by a strange neutrality. The world has not collapsed. This is the beginning of Nigredo. Though I will not speak of it as doctrine. It is experienced as disorientation. The old light goes out. What once felt virtuous now feels hollow. What once brought praise now brings irritation from others. Inside you feel a dull heaviness, a sense of having stepped into a room where the furniture has been removed. There is nowhere to sit yet, only the floor. You believe that your value lay in maintaining harmony. The moment stretches. Their face registers confusion, then irritation. You have not defended yourself. The contract cracks. Authority does not come from winning these moments. It comes from surviving them without retreat. When you do not collapse back into usefulness, the psyche learns something new. It can withstand disapproval. This learning is somatic before it is conceptual. Your breath deepens after the encounter. Your shoulders drop slightly. Sleep, though still uneven, becomes heavier. There is often a dream at this stage. A house with rooms you have never entered, a locked door you suddenly notice, a basement flooded with dark water. The images are not symbolic puzzles. They are direct communications. They show you how much of your life has been lived in the front rooms. Brightly lit, easily accessible. Authority begins when you descend. In daily life, this descent looks unremarkable. You answer fewer questions. You offer fewer explanations. When someone presses, you repeat yourself once, simply, or you do not repeat at all. Your voice grows shorter, not colder, more contained. This containment unsettles those accustomed to your openness. They may escalate, becoming louder, more emotional, more insistent. The old you would have rushed to soothe. The new posture holds. You believed that explaining yourself prevented misunderstanding. But the psyche was actually using explanation to maintain hierarchy. The behavior was over-clarification. The body consequence was shallow breathing, a constant readiness to respond. The relational consequence was being treated as negotiable. I stand outside now. Frost forming along the edges of iron tools. The cold bites the skin sharp and clean. There is no comfort in it, but there is clarity. Authority often feels like this at first. Bracing, unsentimental, real. As you remain in this posture, something shifts in how others approach you. Some pull away quietly. Their need for your function outweighs their interest in your being. Others test boundaries, pushing to see if the old reflex will return. A few, fewer than you expect, adjust. They speak differently. They listen longer. They no longer assume your availability. These relationships change texture. They gain weight. This is albedo, not as purity but as separation. You begin to see clearly what was never reciprocal. The clarity can be painful. It often arrives in small scenes. A message left unanswered longer than usual. A request that goes unfulfilled. The absence reveals more than years of presence ever did. There is a car scene. You are driving alone. The road dim. Your hands rest on the wheel, steady. You replay an interaction from earlier. You did less than usual. You did not fix. You did not soften. The familiar guilt flickers, then fades. In its place there is a quiet alertness. Your body feels more solid, as if gravity has increased slightly. You are more here. At Bollingen, chalk dust clings faintly to my fingers from earlier work. It leaves marks where it touches stone, then disappears. Not everything that contacts you must be absorbed. This is a lesson learned slowly. Through repetition, authority emerges not as a stance but as a consequence. It is what remains when you stop trading your inner life for external stability. Others feel it as a boundary they cannot quite see. They sense that access is no longer automatic. They must approach differently or not at all. There is often a final test in this phase, a moment designed unconsciously to pull you back. Someone appeals to history. You've always been the one who understands. The words land with precision. You feel them in your chest. A tightening that echoes childhood. The impulse to step back into role is strong. You pause. Your body holds the tension without resolving it. Not this time. You say quietly, or you simply do not respond. The appeal fails. Something decisive ends. You believed that loyalty required self-erasure. But the psyche was actually confusing familiarity with truth. The behavior was staying beyond your capacity. The body consequence was exhaustion that sleep did not cure. The relational consequence was being taken for granted. As this pattern dissolves, authority consolidates, not dramatically, not publicly, but internally. Your sense of self is no longer contingent on reaction. You no longer scan the environment for cues about who to be. Your responses arise more slowly, more accurately. Others adjust their expectations or they leave. Both outcomes are clarifying. I pause again. The lake barely visible now. Its surface catching a thin line of light. The water does not reach for the shore. It meets it. By the end of this movement, you are no longer useful in the old way. And because of that, you are no longer manageable. Authority has taken root not as dominance but as density. You occupy your space without apology. Those who meet you feel it immediately, and they must decide how to stand in relation to it. As the old usefulness collapses, something unexpected follows. Stillness. Not peace, not relief. Stillness that feels almost suspicious, as if something should be demanded of you at any moment. You notice how often you reach internally for a task that no longer exists. The reflex is quick. Like a hand searching for a railing in the dark. There is nothing there. Your body pauses mid-gesture. This pause is not empty. It is crowded with unfamiliar sensations. Weight in the legs, a steadier pulse, a subtle heat behind the sternum that does not rush outward. This is the stage where many retreat. They mistake the absence of demand for emptiness. They mistake the loss of function for loss of meaning. But what has disappeared is not meaning. It is the false god that lived on exchange. I give, therefore I am allowed to remain. There is a workroom scene, perhaps not literal, perhaps internal. You sit at a desk or stand by a window. There is nothing urgent to respond to. No message blinking. No problem presented for you to solve. Your attention drifts not outward but inward. The body resists at first. It has been trained to scan, to anticipate, to lean forward. Now it must learn to rest without collapsing. This learning is slow. It happens in muscles before thoughts. In ancient images, this moment was described as the false god losing its throne. In Gnostic language, the archons ruled not through overt violence, but through agreement. They governed by convincing the soul that compliance was safety. Your usefulness was one such agreement. When you withdraw it, the archon does not vanish. It panics. It whispers consequences: abandonment, isolation, meaninglessness. These whispers feel intimate because they were learned early. You believed that stopping would lead to emptiness. But the psyche was actually clearing space for weight. The behavior was overfunctioning. The body consequence was chronic restlessness, inability to sit without distraction. The relational consequence was invisibility beneath reliability. At Bollingen, I stand near a hinge set into an old wooden door. The metal is worn smooth where hands have passed over it for decades. The hinge does not open the door by effort. It holds the axis. Authority in the psyche is like this. It does not push. It bears rotation. As you remain in this cleared space, something else becomes visible. Anger. Not explosive. Condensed. Long held. It often appears first as irritation at small things. A tone, a delay, a demand phrased as expectation. You notice it in your body as heat in the arms, a clenching in the hands. In the past, this anger was quickly redirected into explanation or self-correction. Now it has nowhere to go. It stays. This staying is crucial. Anger here is not pathology. It is information. It tells you where you were overdrawn, where you gave beyond consent, where your presence was consumed. Allowing this anger to exist without action is part of rubido. Though again, I will not teach it as theory. It is felt as a deepening of color in the inner world. Things are no longer pale. There's often a relational scene that marks this shift. Someone approaches you with familiarity, assuming access. The words are casual, almost affectionate, but the expectation underneath is unchanged. You listen. Your body remains upright. You do not lean in. When they finish, there is a pause. You respond honestly without cushioning. The truth is not cruel. It is simply unsoftened. They react with surprise, perhaps with offense, perhaps with withdrawal. You remain where you are. The ground holds. You believe that kindness required softening truth. But the psyche was actually using softness to avoid rupture. The behavior was preemptive apology. The body consequence was a constant knot in the stomach. The relational consequence was being perceived as endlessly adaptable. Authority is recognized here, not granted. It appears in how others recalibrate their approach. Some become cautious. Some become respectful in a way they never were before. They ask instead of assume. They wait instead of demand. Others disappear. This disappearance can sting, but it also clarifies. What leaves was never in relationship with you. It was in relationship with your function. I pause again. The air carries the smell of soot and cold water. There is a rope coiled nearby, rough against the palm. It holds because it is bound, not because it stretches endlessly. As authority consolidates, your inner speech changes. Fewer rehearsals, fewer imaginary dialogues, less retroactive editing of conversations. Your nights grow quieter, though not immediately restful. The psyche is reorganizing. Old circuits fall silent. New ones are not yet efficient. This inefficiency is often misread as weakness. It is not. It is reconfiguration. There is a dream image many report at this stage. A figure approaches, familiar but distorted. A parent, a partner, a superior. They demand entry. You stand before a threshold. The door is solid. You feel fear, but you do not move aside. You wake with your heart pounding, but also with a strange sense of solidity. The dream is not about defiance. It is about position. In waking life, this position shows itself quietly. You do not rush to respond to disappointment. You let others have their reactions without managing them. You notice how often disappointment dissolves when not fed. You notice how some conflicts never escalate when you do not volunteer yourself as mediator. These observations are sobering. They reveal how much labor was unnecessary. You believed that holding things together was your responsibility, but the psyche was actually preventing others from meeting reality. The behavior was constant repair. The body consequence was fatigue that lived in the bones. The relational consequence was asymmetry masked as closeness. Aballing I look up now. The sky is clear. Constellations hold their patterns without effort. They do not adjust themselves to be seen. They remain. And those who look must adapt their eyes. By this stage, authority has shifted from an event to a condition. It is no longer something you practice. It is something that organizes you. Your no does not need emphasis. Your yes is rarer, heavier. When you speak, it is from a place that has already decided. Others feel this. They sense that negotiation has limits now. That access must be earned, not assumed. This does not make you isolated. It makes you locatable. Those who approach now meet a boundary that does not move to accommodate their anxiety. Some turn away. Some step closer with respect. The difference is immediate, unmistakable. The old script cannot reach you here. It has no language for this posture. Authority has not been claimed. It has emerged because there is finally someone home. What remains now is quieter than all that came before. Not resolution, not triumph. What remains is gravity, the kind that does not announce itself yet bends everything that comes near. There is often a moment, almost forgettable, when you realize the old pull is gone. Someone reacts with disappointment or irritation and you notice, without pride, without effort, that your body does not move toward it. No tightening in the throat. No lean forward. No internal drafting of explanations. The reaction lands then passes through like weather moving across a field. You no longer live inside it. You register it, but it does not reorganize you. This is the final separation, not from others but from the reflex to earn your place. There may be a gathering again, similar to earlier ones, but now the atmosphere is different. Someone tests you casually as if nothing has changed. A small assumption. A lightly phrased demand. You feel it register in the body as information, not alarm. Your response is brief, accurate, perhaps disappointing to them. You watch their face shift. Something recalculates. The interaction ends sooner than it once would have. You leave the room unchanged. You believed that stability came from managing reactions. But the psyche was actually discovering stability in non-reactivity. The behavior was restraint. The body consequence was a deeper, slower breath. The relational consequence was a clear redistribution of power. This is rubido, but not as completion, as embodiment. The red is not heat. It is weight. You no longer experience yourself as something to be adjusted. You experience yourself as something that stands. At Bollingen, I step across ash where a fire once burned. The ground still holds its warmth faintly. Fire has passed through. It is no longer needed. Authority here is no longer visible as a boundary. It is felt as orientation. You know where you are. You know what is yours. You know what is not. This knowing does not require defense. It does not argue. It simply withdraws energy from what does not belong. There is a final relational scene many do not expect. Someone returns, not to demand but to feel the difference. They speak carefully now. They wait. They do not assume your agreement. You notice how your presence affects their posture, their pace. You are not imposing anything. You are not teaching a lesson. The system has adjusted around you because it must. Others never return. Their absence leaves no wound, only clarity. You see now that what bound you was not love, but an arrangement. Love, when it appears later, moves differently. It does not hurry you. It does not require translation. It does not punish your stillness. You believed that losing usefulness would make you irrelevant. But the psyche was actually removing you from circulation as an object. The behavior was refusal to perform. The body consequence was a steady, grounded sensation in the abdomen. The relational consequence was contact without extraction. At Bollingen, I stand beneath the open sky. The constellations are sharp tonight. Distant and exact, they do not respond to human need. Yet they have guided travelers for centuries. This is how authority ends. Not with declaration, not with hope, not with promise. It ends with a condition quietly established. The self has weight now. It sits where it sits. The old family scripts, the old emotional economies cannot access it anymore. They knock. There is no answer. Not because you are absent, but because you are finally not for sale.